You decided to go to medical school. How big a leap for that was your family?
Well, it was a pretty good leap. Neither my mother or dad got to go through college. They were self-educated and ran a business and, did quite well. And I went to Gettysburg College. And then in my senior year, I decided I'd go into medicine. So I had to scurry around and get all my credits and then ended up going to medical school at Duke. It was, to me, a very, very wise decision. I loved medicine and delivered a lot of babies and still enjoy the idea of practicing medicine, but I've gotten fascinated with economics and politics and been involved in politics as well. I feel very blessed that I have been able to do both.
And you were a flight surgeon with the Air Force in the early 60s.
Right.
Did you serve in Vietnam?
I never had to go to Vietnam. On active duty, it was 63 to 65. It really got activated. The military was activated after 65, but I was in the Air National Guard during that time but I was also went back to my residency. I was drafted out of my residency during the Cuban crisis, but then did stay in. I was in a total of 5 years, but traveled a lot while in the Air Force to places like even in Ethiopia and Iran and Turkey and all through the Middle East. So I did a lot of traveling as a flight surgeon, but I never went to Vietnam. I had been to Korea a couple times.
What does a flight surgeon do? Because as a doctor, you were an OBGYN. At that time, I would imagine there weren't too many pregnant women in the military.
I hadn't finished my OBGYN residency. I'd had 2 years of internal medicine. So it's general medicine for flying personnel. I think the surgeon is misleading. I mean, I didn't actually do surgery as a flight surgeon, but that's the term they use for people who are specialized in taking care of pilots and other flying personnel.
What do you remember from that time? I mean, there you are, a young man in the midst of this build-up towards the Vietnam War. What was that like for you?
I wasn't as strongly anti-war. I was thinking things through and doing a lot of reading at that time.
So you're still shaping your opinions in terms of what foreign policy
but I do
should
remember one doctor that made national news in the early 60s who refused to go. And, that to me was unpatriotic, but I thought, he has some points. And I tell all my veterans groups today when I go and speak to them, because they know my position on the war, and they don't hold it against me. I said, I served, I was called, I was drafted. Unlike some others, they take deferments and not go when they're called. So I went and I made the best of it. But I tell them I'm in a different position now. I'm a representative. I'm in Congress. I vote on these very important issues. And to me, it's very, very important about when you vote for war and send young people off. But my ideas were being formulated then, and I was really very much involved. That's when during the time I was in the military, I had more time to read, and I got involved in reading Austrian free market economics and novels. I read Dr. Zhivago, and which had an impact on me, as well as all of Ayn Rand's novels.
You then settled into an OBGYN practice in Lake Jackson, Texas. And Congressman Paul, I read that at one time you were the only OBGYN in the entire Brazoria County. The only OBGYN in the entire county. What was that like?
It kept me busy, and it was hard.
And you had 5 children yourself.
Right, and it was hard to get time off.
I bet.
Because you had to be around. But I really enjoyed it. It was busy, and I did it on purpose. I went there because I knew I would be busy. There had been one doctor there before I came, but he was leaving, so I took over the day I arrived. I had a very, very busy practice. But now it's different. It's a lot more physicians there today.
And you also didn't accept Medicare and Medicaid payments at that time. You did the work for free or offered reduced rates for your lowest income patients.
That's right, because I believe that government payment of your bills interferes with the doctor-patient relationship. And it was the beginning in the early 60s of this government involvement, and government's a mess, and the only thing anybody's calling for is more government, not realizing the government's created our mess. But I remember working, when I was in the military in San Antonio, I remember working moonlighting in a hospital to make a couple extra dollars and get some extra experience. So I'd go to the emergency room and I worked for $3 an hour. As a physician, I'd been out of medical school for 2 years, and I'd stay up all night and taking care of all the emergencies, and it was in a church hospital. And the amazing thing was, nobody was ever turned away. Nobody nobody was ever asked about their income, and everybody got taken care of.
$3 an hour.
$3 an hour.
Even in the 60s, that's not a lot of pay for a doctor.
It wasn't a whole lot, but it was a mixture of experience and a couple dollars. Back then, $3 meant a lot more. Today, that would be like $30 an hour. So, and that
still isn't a lot.
That still isn't a whole lot, too. Not even up to a plumber's wage. Yeah.
I'd love to ask you more on this, but I want to go back to our callers. But one more question for you, again, on the biography end of things. So you had this very busy OBGYN practice. You had 5 kids. When and why and how did you enter politics? I mean, it sounds like your hands were completely full.
Well, there was something established in 1945 as the war was closing down, and it happened to have been established in the state of New Hampshire. It was called Bretton Woods. There was an agreement that was seriously flawed, and it was predicted by the free market Austrian economists that it would totally fail, even though it was set up in 1945. It was a pseudo-gold standard. And the predictions came true in 1971. The Bretton Woods broke apart, and we did it because of a consequence of the philosophy of the 60s of guns and butter, welfare and warfare.
Government spending.
Right. The same thing that we're doing now. I mean, I think things are worse right now. So the prediction came true, and that's when it sort of woke me up on August 15th, 1971, that we put on wage and price controls, and we said we are going to default on our promise to honor our dollar with gold to all foreigners who would bring dollars to the Treasury. So it was a complete failure, and it was very chaotic, and it ushered in a bad decade. Inflation was, 15%, and unemployment rates were over 12%, and interest rates went to 21%, and the dollar had to be rescued. And so that had an impact on me. So in 1974, I decided I just wanted to talk about this, and it was sort of an education adventure. And I was convinced not much would come of it because I wasn't going to be playing the role of Santa Claus. I was going to play the role of trying to give advice on what we ought to do, both in domestic and foreign policy, and especially in monetary policy. And I was surprised when I did win.
So dismay over monetary politics, the abandonment of the gold standard in the early 70s, that's when you said, I've got to jump into this.
Right. And the chaos that had been predicted, and that came, and then I was convinced that somebody should say something about what's going on.
To Andover, and Jen is on the air. Hi, Jen, go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Paul. I have a question and a comment. My comment very quickly is to say thank you for running. I am tired of politicians telling me one thing and voting another way, and I can see from your record that you are truly a man of your word. My question to you today is the Democrats are talking much about health care, and their answer to health care is socialized medicine. What would your answer be?
Thanks, Jen, for the question.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We have a mess, and the Democrats now say we have to have socialism. Socialism doesn't work. I mean, anybody who advocates socialism, I think, they're going in the wrong direction. We've had a form of medicine since the 60s, and it continues in that direction. It's not socialized medicine, but in a way, it's interventionist type of medicine where the government regulates and controls and spends, and it lends itself more toward a fascist approach because right now, most of the money in medicine ends up in the hands of corporations, the HMOs, the PPOs, and hospital management companies, and Wall Street, and investors, and it ruins the doctor-patient relationship. Because of this, prices go up. So people who are on the margin, who might not have insurance and can't pay for it, they're getting hit with an 8 or 9 or 10% inflation rate in medical care costs. And to me, it's all a consequence of government intervention. The American people have been offered 2 lousy choices. One, which is corporatism, or a fascist type of approach, or socialism. And we deliver a lot of services in this country through the free market. And when you do it through the free market, prices go down. But in medicine, prices go up. Technology doesn't help the cost of medicine. It goes up instead of down. But if you look at almost all other industries that are much freer, technology lowers the prices. Just think of how the price of a cell phone goes down. Poor people have cell phones and televisions and computers. Prices all go down. But in medicine, they go up, and there's a reason for that. And that's because the government's involved with it. So I would say the most important thing we can do is turn back this trend towards socialism and socialized and government control, and allow people to opt out of the system. Let them get out and give them a tax credit, and let them have their hospital, the medical savings account where they get all their money back off their taxes, and they're in control.